You are standing at an altar. You are wearing an uncomfortable outfit, repeating vows, and sliding a metal ring onto someone's finger. Music plays. Everyone smiles. It is the ultimate celebration of finding your soulmate, the person you are destined to love forever. Feels like the most natural, deeply human thing in the world. A tradition as old as humanity itself, right? Wrong. For roughly 290,000 years, or about 99% of human history, this magical moment simply did not exist. We link marriage to romance and destiny. But if ancient humans didn't marry for love, why did we invent this lifelong, legally binding contract? Before we decode this ancient corporate merger, if you are addicted to the hidden origins of human behavior, hit subscribe to Primal Mind. To understand marriage, we have to forget everything Hollywood taught us and look at how our ancestors actually survived the prehistoric world. For those first 290,000 years, humans lived in small, nomadic hunter-gatherer bands. They moved constantly and owned almost nothing. In these early societies, survival depended entirely on the group. You shared your food, you shared your shelter, and often you shared your partners. You might think, why not just stay with one person because you care about them? Because human feelings are incredibly fragile and temporary. When starvation or predators are daily threats, relying on true love to keep a family fed is a terrible, terrible survival strategy. Anthropologists like Stephen Beckerman found that in some South American foraging tribes, like the Bari, they practice something called partible paternity. They believe a child is not made by just one man, but is built up over time by the biological contributions of multiple men. This wasn't chaos. It was a biological insurance policy. If a child has 3 recognized fathers, that child has 3 hunters protecting it. For millennia, love and reproduction were a community effort. But then, humanity made a fatal mistake. We invented the concept of owning dirt. About 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, everything changed. We stopped chasing our food and started growing it. The Agricultural Revolution, Site 1. For the first time in human history, we stayed in one place. We built permanent houses. We claimed plots of land. We hoarded grain. This created a brand new concept that our nomadic ancestors never had to worry about: surplus, wealth, private property. And with property came a very human desire: you cannot take it with you when you die, so you leave it to your children. Here is where biology creates a massive economic problem. Maternity is a biological certainty. A mother knows the baby is hers. Paternity, however, is a matter of opinion. Without modern genetic testing, an ancient man could never be 100% sure he was the father. In a nomadic tribe, this did not matter. But when you own a valuable farm, you absolutely do not want to pass it to a stranger's genetics. To mathematically guarantee that his wealth went to his true biological heir, a man had to do one thing: restrict the woman. He needed exclusive, undisputed access to her reproduction. And thus, the casual, communal dating scene of the Paleolithic era was violently shut down. Monogamy was not born out of a sudden romantic awakening. It was born out of paranoia and the desperate need to protect real estate. Early marriage was essentially an ownership arrangement, a way to draw a literal fence around a bloodline, just like drawing a fence around a field. You can think of these early marital bonds as the world's very first DNA copyright law. It ensured that the wealth accumulated by one generation stayed locked within a strictly monitored, verified genetic lineage. In these early setups, women were often treated as a transaction, shifting from the property of her father to the property of her husband. But how do you legally enforce such a rigid, unnatural system in a growing civilization? You don't just promise, you put it in writing. Around 1750 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest legal systems in the world was carved into stone: the Code of Hammurabi, Site 1. If you read these ancient laws, you will not find anything about soulmates, true love, or romantic destiny. Instead, the marriage laws read exactly like a cold, calculated accounting ledger or a modern real estate transaction. According to the code, if a man takes a woman but does not draw up a formal contract, she is not a wife. The core of the marriage was the exchange of property, the bride price, and the dowry. Wealth literally changed hands. For thousands of years, marriage wasn't a romantic fairy tale. It was, quite literally, a corporate merger between two families. Patriarchs traded their daughters to forge political alliances, settle debts, or combine neighboring agricultural fields into much larger estates. This also explains why ancient laws were obsessively strict about female fidelity. A wife's affair threatened the entire inheritance system. If a woman strayed, the penalties were severe. But a man? His affairs didn't risk bringing an outside heir to his own estate. This economic model of marriage spread across the globe, from the elite dynasties of China to the powerful patriarchs of ancient Rome. In Rome, under patria potestas, a father had absolute legal ownership over his children and his daughters' marriages until the day he died. It sounds harsh to our modern ears, but from a purely evolutionary and economic standpoint, this strict institution worked perfectly. It successfully organized societies, kept property concentrated, and prevented rival tribes from constantly slaughtering each other over land disputes. The system was incredibly stable, but it was entirely devoid of the one ingredient we now consider the absolute core of a wedding. Marriage was engineered purely as a cold, calculated business transaction. When exactly did we start adding the romance? The truth is, an emotionless economic contract is very hard to enforce. To keep people loyal to the system, society needed a much better marketing strategy. So over thousands of years, we gradually layered the cold, hard mathematics of property with epic poetry, religious ceremonies, and the concept of destiny. We essentially draped a beautiful romantic cultural blanket over a ruthless, calculated real estate arrangement just to make it more bearable. This is the ultimate paradigm shift of human history. Today, you view marriage as the absolute highest expression of unconditional love. But your ancient ancestors viewed it as the ultimate expression of ownership, a rigid tool to keep the farm in the family. Yet, this shows the incredible transformative power of human culture. We inherited a rigid, ancient agricultural property law from our ancestors, and we successfully hacked it. We took a system built purely for survival and wealth, and repurposed it to serve our emotional needs. In a way, love wasn't the foundation of the modern marriage. Love was our beautiful, deeply human rebellion against it. The next time you stand at a wedding altar or look down at the golden ring shining on your finger, remember its true origin. That little band of metal started out as a heavy chain of property transfer and lineage control. But over millennia of cultural evolution, humanity made a choice. We melted that chain down, and we forged it into a circle of trust. Of course, history is constantly being rewritten whenever new archaeological evidence emerges from the dirt. And many anthropological theories about exactly how ancient humans paired up are still heavily debated by scholars today. But that is exactly what makes our human past so endlessly fascinating. It is always messier than the fairy tales. Subscribe to Primal Mind, and next week, we will decode another primal secret hiding right in the middle of your daily life.